Hey everybody, it's Ron, and today I'm going to be talking about The Forever War, written by John Haldeman in 1974. This is a book that I've been wanting to read for a while now, and once I started it, I couldn't put it down. I think it's the fastest I've ever finished a book, and that's a testament to Haldeman's great writing and fast-paced storytelling. This novel follows a man named William Mandela as he embarks on a military journey that lasts over 1,000 years. The reason this is possible is because of the use of collapsers that shoot our main character into the outer reaches of space to fight an enemy called the Taurans. One of the problems I had with this early on was that he gets recruited in the year 1997, and that might have seemed futuristic in the 70s, but there's no way the military would be able to travel through space and fight in advanced suits, so you have to kind of suspend your disbelief on that, and it eventually does jump far into the future because Haldeman uses time dilation, which to me was the most interesting part of this book. So let's get into it. The first section of this book deals with the training of all the new recruits, and we get a good understanding of how the battle suits work and how dangerous they are. It doesn't help that the environment on this planet they're training on is harsh and unforgiving, and there are some brutal casualties without ever seeing the enemy. The first thing that struck me was how scary this was to read, and obviously I don't mean in a horror way, but just imagining being recruited and traveling to alien worlds to fight an enemy that you don't know anything about really frightened me as I read on. But I was also so captivated because the writing is really great. You don't really get a good grasp on any particular character right away, but it does become clear that Mary Gay is one of the standouts, and you start to realize that William favors her over anyone he bunks with, which I thought was a kind of bizarre idea in this, that they're all basically randomly picked to sleep with each other throughout. Other than that, it's more about Mandela recalling his training and how dangerous it was. Even the parts with these soldiers having simulated battles with drones was riveting, and I couldn't believe that a lot of this was written in 1974, because most of the stuff he wrote about is utilized by the military today, even if it's not as futuristic as it is displayed here. One thing that surprised me was how little actual combat Mandela goes through the entire span of his career, but also how effective this book still is. Haldeman decides to focus more on what it's like to be a soldier in between the combat, and how that takes a toll on the morale of everyone fighting in this war, and how the time dilation messes with them. I like how unpredictable his tour of duty is, and how he trains on a cold planet only to be sent to battle on a planet that turns out to be just as warm or even warmer than Earth. The first run-in with the Taurans is unsettling from the start, and it's no secret that Haldeman was writing about his experiences in Vietnam, and even seems to model the planet after it. Haldeman really tricked me when he describes the creatures that they end up slaughtering, and it's really sudden and anticlimactic, but you realize that they aren't the Taurans, and instead they're just creatures that are native to the planet. Things get intense when they actually do meet them, and I thought the idea of the soldiers being under a hypnotic spell, basically that makes them all bloodthirsty savages, is unsettling. Especially when the battle is over and they come out of it in shock and have to take mood-enhancing pills. In my mind, I thought the Taurans were going to be really formidable, and I started to realize that that's not what this book is about, and obviously it in no way glorifies war. The humans take care of them pretty quickly, and instead of feeling satisfied as a reader, I just felt like it was an unfair slaughter that served no purpose. But that's the whole point. Throughout most of the book, I kept wondering if the Taurans were even the bad guys, and that is by design. When William arrives back on Earth after a tour of duty, Many years have gone by, and his mom is way older, and the Earth is very different, even though he only aged slightly, which I thought was the most interesting aspect of this book. And where this section could be seen as a part that slows down the story, it had the opposite effect on me, and I thought this was one of the best parts of the story, because Haldeman's vision of the future is really bleak, and I was really surprised at a lot of things that he got right. One part that really stood out to me was when Mandela talks about how much entertainment on Earth had changed, and when he describes how bad music is and how bad movies have gotten and they barely have any plot anymore, I couldn't help but think of how entertainment has devolved today in some ways, and I thought it was pretty funny how, to me, it sounded like he was talking about modern-day entertainment. He also talks about overpopulation and how currency has changed, and it's a really depressing outlook. The thing that keeps our main character sane is that he gets to spend time with Mary Gay, who is basically his partner in this, and the only person he seems to be living for in a world that he no longer understands. I was really captivated by the part where he visits her family, and it ends in a really tragic way and seemed really post-apocalyptic, with their farm being raided, and ends with both of Mary Gay's parents dying. And then to make it worse, Mandela's mom ends up dying shortly after, solidifying the fact that they don't belong on Earth, and before you know it, they're back on duty. This really reflects a lot on real soldiers' stories of coming home and not fitting into society again, so they feel like their only choice is to go back to war. I found it really heartbreaking when Mary Gay and Mandela get split up because he knows that he probably will never see her again, which gives you the sense of his isolation, especially because a lot of the new recruits are from the far future, and he feels like an alien himself that can't relate to anyone anymore because he's a man out of time, and she was the only thing that kept him going. Haldeman also writes about amputees, having both of his main characters go through this, and puts his own sci-fi twist on it by making technology that regrows limbs, and I found it really fascinating and was impressed by the way he explained his tech throughout the book. You really get a sense of the dehumanizing nature of being a soldier and how your life is not in your hands because you never know where you're going to get sent. I like that even though Mandela is a hardened soldier, he never really thinks much of himself and remains humble and realistic the whole time. I definitely think he's a heroic character, even though the war he's fighting seems to be all for nothing. He turns to alcohol and seems like he's just going through the motions as the years go by, and he ends up in charge of brand new recruits who are really different than anyone he's ever been in battle with before. This was a great last section because I liked seeing Mandela come into his own as a leader and how he dealt with people who didn't respect him. I like that the author explains that the English language is so different at this time and that it's hard for Mandela to understand any of these new recruits since he's been away from Earth for so long. The final battle is unrelenting and cinematic and also filled with tension. Mandela has really matured and does what he thinks is best. The close combat feels really brutal, and the Taurans advance in technology towards the end, which makes them an even match for the soldiers. I can definitely see how movies like Aliens and even video games like Halo could have maybe taken inspiration from this novel. And I always find it fascinating how inventive people were years ago. And other than the book starting in 1997, it didn't feel dated at all, which makes this a pretty timeless book. The thing I was most shocked by was the ending and how it left things on a happy note. Other than the tragedy of Mandela going through hell for most of his life, only for the clones on Earth to tell him that it was basically all for nothing and a misunderstanding between the humans and the Taurans because they didn't communicate. He at least gets reunited with Mary Gay, and I didn't see that coming at all, but it was a welcome surprise. I really enjoyed this book, and it was hard to find any real nitpicks aside from the starting point being sort of unrealistic, but that didn't even affect the story at all because it was just so interesting all the way through, and that's rare. I would definitely recommend this to anyone into sci-fi because this is one of the classics of the genre. I think I'm going to read Starship Troopers next because that seems like the other side of the coin as far as military science fiction books go, so it should be interesting. So those are my thoughts on the Forever War. It's a fantastic read. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you're into this type of content, and thanks for watching.